Thanks, Stephen. Well, good morning and welcome. And can I start with an apology for those who might be watching on the stream for the 15-minute delay? We have had some IT issues, but welcome to the session. And given the makeup of this session, I'm going to ask people that are on screen to introduce themselves and their organisations, and I'll go down the list as I've got it. And it's also a form of a roll call as well. So can I start with Peter Syrett, please?
Hi, good morning. My name is Peter Syrett. I work for the flood risk management team at Gloucestershire County Council, local flood authority for Gloucestershire. So our interest in rivers is primarily from a flood risk perspective. We do have certain consenting and enforcement powers on ordinary water courses that we share with the district and borough councils. And we, as part of our planning consultation role, we try to minimise the impact on water quality from new developments as well. So I guess that's our there are sort of main contributions to river pollution. Okay.
Thank you, Peter. Is Alistair with us from TBC?
Just had apologies from Alistair via email. He's unable to make it.
Okay. Tom Hitchin from Gloucester City Council.
Hello. Yes, Tom Hitchin at Gloucester City Council. I'm primarily here for flood risk management. Obviously, we have a certain role in planning applications like Peter Syrett as well.
Thanks, Tom. Okay. The EA, Sophie, can you update me with the EA, because you know the officer who ideally would have loved to have been with us.
Excuse me. So I've been in contact with David Hudson at the EA, who was hoping to attend. Unfortunately, he was on leave when we finalised the date. He was hoping to be able to send someone else, but they've not been able to do that. So I will be in contact with him after to invite them to the next meeting, because they are really interested in participating, but it's just fallen on a bad week for them.
Okay. And the next one is two gentlemen that have joined from what I call WASP. Ash, introduce yourself briefly and your partner.
Yeah, sure. Ash Smith, founder of Windrush Against Sewage Pollution, working clearly principally on the River Windrush, but also now linking in a much wider field in the Cotswold Rivers. We gave evidence to the Environmental Audit Committee inquiry in July and linked with the Philip Dunn Coalition around preventing pollution.
Okay. And Peter?
Yeah, well, a ditto for everything that Ash said, but I particularly specialise as a mathematician on analysing the data that comes from the EA and from the water companies on the performance of the sewage treatment works.
Thank you. Another group, Surfers Against Sewerage, have they got a rep in? Is that Debbie? You're on mute, I think.
Hi, yeah, I'm Debbie Campbell. I've been working with Surfers Against Sewage for almost 20 years when I was living near the coast, but now I live in the Cotswolds. So I've been working quite closely to Ashley with WASP and also been made a trustee of the Cotswold River Trust.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
No worries.
Anyone from Gloucester Wildlife Trust? And what about the National Water Quality Canal and River Trust? Is there anyone here from that organisation?
Yes, hi, that's me. So I'm Sarah James. Sit in a small environment team for the Canal and River Trust, which covers the Gloucester and Sharpness Canal. But obviously we're a recipient of water from, little rivers and streams.
Okay. Thanks very much, and thanks for joining us. Now, finally on my list, I've got Save the Wye. Have they got a representative in?
That's me. I'm Rachel Bomford. So
Yes.
I'm part of the Save the Wye group. We did our Walking with the Wye awareness raising campaign in July, from the source of the Wye down through to the sea. And we are affiliated with Friends of the Upper Wye. And we've now recently started Friends of the Lower Wye. And we're involved in trying to set up some more citizen science testing, as well as awareness raising.
Thank you. That's all I had on the list of attendees, but I would like members to introduce themselves to the wider audience. That it is something we trusted is attracting the interest. That's why we're streaming. Can I start with on my screen, Kate? Introduce yourself, Kate.
Hi, yes, I'm Kate. I live in Tewkesbury and I'm a town borough and county councillor. And obviously we have the Two Rivers meeting here from the Avon and the Severn.
Yeah. Susan Williams.
Good morning. I'm Sue Williams and I'm the county councillor for the Bisley with Lypiat Painswick division. We have the Painswick River running through many of the small parishes that I am the county councillor for. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Paul Hodgkinson, the original mover of the motion to bring this forward. Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Phil. Councillor Paul Hodgkinson, County Councillor for Bourton-on-the-Water and North Leach Division in the Cotswolds. And as Phil said, it was me who brought the motion to the council last year, calling for this task group to be set up.
Alex.
Hello, I'm Alex Hegenbarth. I'm County Councillor for Bishop's Cleeve Division. While we don't have any major rivers running through the division, flooding also a major part for us. So in terms of how river flooding impacts surface water, flooding and drainage is a major concern for local residents and myself.
Thanks, Alex. Graham.
Yeah, good morning all. Graham Morgan, County Council for Sinniford and Rusbridge in the Forest of Dean.
Dom Cotswolds.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, all ladies and gents. Councillor down in the bottom right-hand corner of Gloucestershire, Fairford, Letchley, in the villages. We have the Windrush and the Colne running through my division. I'm really excited to see so many experts and ninjas on this subject together today. Really, really important. It's great to see such a breadth there.
Sophie, you better introduce yourself because we're streaming.
Good morning, I'm Sophie Benfield. I'm the Democratic Services Advisor from the Council supporting the task group.
Thank you. Have I called everybody apart from myself? Yeah, and I'm Phil Orford, chairing this session. I'm the member for a division called Hynham, known as being very wet myself, because most of my parishes border the River Severn, where I learned to swim years ago. Yeah. Okay, we'll make a start then. It's basically member questions and discussions, because I think the plan here is that what we want to formulate is what we're going to be asking on October the 14th when we have the water companies in front of us. Not just us as members, but obviously the groups that have got particular interest in the subject matter. But since it is very much a response to Paul's original motion, I'll start with Paul, because obviously you've been doing a fair bit of work up on the Cotswolds anyway with the groups that are joining us today. So over to you, Paul.
My connection cut out briefly just before you said that last thing, so I'm not quite sure what you said you were asking me to do, but just give a bit of context. Was that it?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you've been working closely with the groups, a lot of the groups that are with us today, and in fairness, it was your original motion, so you know, I'm only chairing it. The context, I think, would be good from your perspective.
Okay, yeah, no, thank you. So I brought the motion last September, and it was actually after discussions with Ash from WASP. I think WASP got in touch with me probably, well, almost 2 years ago now, I think. And they will talk for themselves shortly, I'm sure, but they're incredibly detailed and thorough research that they've done, and they know what they're talking about. And I must admit, when I heard what they were talking about the River Windrush, which is in my part of the Cotswolds, I was pretty shocked, I think, as most residents are, at the extent of pollution. So that then prompted me to bring the motion to the council last September, which was, I think, pretty much unanimously supported, which is calling for a real examination of the extent of pollution of our waterways in Gloucestershire, the kind of key causes of those things, and then driving towards how we can clean that pollution up, how we can influence the cleaning of that pollution up, and how we can get to a much better state of affairs whereby at least some of our waterways are, clean, designated clean, or bathing status, or however you'd like to call it, so that we make some actual tangible progress. So really, I think that's, given the timing here, that's the context. And today I really want to know about the extent of pollution that people feel there is out there. Obviously, the fact we don't have the EA here is a challenge, because they're the people who are responsible for the cleanliness of our waterways. So we kind of have to get them at some point, don't we? Is that okay, Phil?
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, it is very disappointing because certainly the individual officer I know is very interested in the subject. Okay, we've timed it when he was on leave, but we had to push on. I mean, we've been delayed long enough with the group anyway, so we have to push on. I'm pretty sure that they'll join us, certainly for the session with the water companies. If I was the EA, and I ought to declare a bit of an interest, but I don't need to in a working group. I'd certainly want to be at that session with the water companies. I'm looking at members. Dom, nice to see the hands raised functions working.
Thank you, Chair. And I just want to pick up on something Paul said, really. I don't know about the rest of the team here, but I'm actually getting a bit bored of talking about how difficult the situation is, and I'm more keen on what to do about it. I think we as a group could get ourselves in knots trying to find the perfect data set on this. And I'd really like at least part of this conversation to be about enforcement. And it's not something that comes natural to me to push on the enforcement issue. But the EA haven't turned up to 2 meetings this week. One is with Sir Geoffrey Clifton Brown as the elected Member of Parliament in the Cotswolds and the Minister responsible. And they haven't turned up to this either. And frankly, I'm just getting a bit frustrated. And my personal view is that a letter should be written to them asking them why they haven't attended and asking for a session. Well, actually, I'll change my language, demanding a session. And I'm just fed up of talking, really.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree. And I suspect I'm seeing hands raised. The same thing potentially is going to come from Kate. Kate.
Thanks. A couple of things, really. For me, sewage issues, that the map where you can see sewage being distributed into our local rivers is actually eye-watering, and if we can make that link available to it, I'm sure everybody knows about it anyway. So 3 issues really: sewage, flooding. Obviously, I live in Tewkesbury. It was fairly extraordinary in 2007, but we are also having more regular flooding and in different places, etc. And obviously pollution, farming, runoff from manure, chemicals, etc. But also the pollution from litter, from plastics, etc. I think that's a really important thing that we need to cover. Personally, I'd like to know why Ilkley is the only designated bathing status, or more so, what do we need to do to get the same? That's a lot of us are here for that reason. So I'd like to hear from the experts, what are the sorts of things that we can actually do? And then I have a sort of a question which relates to this really. What do the representatives consider the catchment-based approach shared by partners in the Seven Rivers Trust, etc.? Do they think it's strong enough to attract the government funding that's needed to help improve the water quality and the biodiversity, etc., flood mitigation and all of that? Thank you.
Thanks, Kate, and I'm sure Sophie's, we'll come back to that in a bit. I'm sure Sophie's captured that. Graham.
Thank you, Chair. My encounter with all of this is obviously when these storms come, as County Councillor for Rustbridge and Sinnerford and Rustbridge, being an Ayleside town and certainly an Ayleside village, when you get these severe storms like we had the other week in the forest, you get a situation where you get raw sewage pumping out of manhole covers, big covers, running down the Ayleside through people's gardens, and then down through the village itself and onto a football field, and with the result in entering eventually the Sinnerford Brook. Now, when these residents had Severn Trent out, they admitted the system was inadequate. The bends in the system was too acute in the part of Rustbridge that we were talking about, but there's nothing they could do about it. And I just don't accept that because it's a public health hazard. In contrast, our own highways, I met Nathan Choate on Monday morning. They're going to do quite a lot of work regards of raising curbs, levels of tarmac to channel this water in a different, because it's a sloping area, terribly sloping area, Ayleside village, in the most acute part of the valley. But we get it in Sinnerford as well. And I'm thinking, whilst what like Kate said, you can see what these companies are not being responsible by putting this stuff into the rivers, but there's also a back thing that we don't ever think about. A lot of these older properties, there was no separate storm systems years ago, and their storm water off their roofs in concreted areas enter the sewer system. Now this stuff is untreated and going down roads, as I said, entering brooks. So it's another pollution through the back door that we don't readily think about, and it's especially acute when these severe storms come. So that's my encounter with it, Chair. So I should be very interested in what Severn Trent got to say, because as a county councillor, I contacted them. They not even bothered to reply yet.
Thanks, Graham. I'm looking at my screen, and I'm looking to see if we can hear something from some of the other participants. I mean, okay, it's a member session, but we specifically wanted to hear from people and have invited them. Is there anyone from our guests? I'm looking along my screen to see if anybody indicates. Yeah, Rachel, I see a raised hand.
Obviously, my focus is on the River Wye, and I agree with Dom. I think there's so much evidence out there indicating that our rivers nationally, particularly I'm thinking of Gloucestershire and the Wye, are severely polluted. The Wye is obviously a mixture between agricultural practices and wastewater treatment plants, and then to a lesser degree, obviously affected by climate change, obviously affected by large planning units, housing units, etc., and also some houses that still directly transmit their sewage straight into the river itself. Now, I think a large amount of the problem for us here on the lower Wye is coming from the massive increase of intensive poultry units up in Powys and Herefordshire. And they just seem to be rubber stamping yet another poultry unit. And lots of people who are far more skilled than I am and knowledgeable are really trying, like the Rivers Trust, River Action Trust, are really trying to fight this. But the planners just keep there've been various court cases taken by the general public. They just seem to fail and get batted out. And I'm wondering whether, because what happens upstream ends up downstream, doesn't it? So in terms of Gloucestershire and the Wye, cannot our planning department put pressure on their planning departments and just say, you've got to stop allowing all of this this increase, and it's not just intensive poultry units, it's free range, it's it's a lot of different agricultural practices, but I don't understand the planning system. But I wondered whether, that's your bag, all you councillors, whether we could put any pressure from Gloucestershire up onto Herefordshire or Powys.
Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, and obviously, yeah, I think a lot of us are aware of the issues on the way, particularly in relation to the poultry units and the increase in that business. And of course, sadly, the EA aren't here. It's the EA that grant the licenses, and it seems that planning authorities, as long as the EA are happy to grant licenses, planning authorities grant planning permission. And I know that myself from being a former district councillor, where we've dealt with planning applications for poultry units.
But sorry to interrupt, but surely if you're going to have a new industrial unit or something, don't you have to prove that you're not going to be polluting the environment with what you do? Isn't that part of the deal?
Yeah, that's where the EA come in with the licensing. Yeah,
it would be Natural Resources Wales up for Powys, but obviously they do Herefordshire. But they're not so the planners don't have the last say then. Is it actually just the EA or NRW that allow these units to pass?
The ultimate decision is with the planning authority rather than the EA. The EA grant the licenses, and I have heard in various places, sitting and watching things, some planning authorities members are quite questioning in relation to the dealing with water courses and effluent, etc. And others don't seem to see it as an issue. But I don't want to get into a planning debate with you, but we'll come back to that anyway, because of what I'm looking for is, from this session, are some real challenges to the water companies. And if the EA are coming back, there's a certain amount of challenge to them as well. Very much along the lines that Don was mentioning earlier on. It's disappointing they're not here. Okay, I'm looking for Ash. Yes, you've raised a hand.
Yeah, it might be helpful then if I kind of give you the overview that WASP has at the moment, and I just hope that you kind of trust our expression of this as an accurate one, because we have a reputation for it, which I hope you've seen tested enough times to have a degree of confidence, and do please feel free to challenge any of it. So, and this is really in response to what Dom is saying about that impatience to just get on and do something, and also Graham about that issue about the law and about public health and what councils can do. So the situation in England and Wales and Scotland, I think, is that the water industry relies on being able to break the law with impunity. If it didn't have that ability, it would just have to close down. So over the past 30 years, it's extracted £60 billion in dividends based on breaking the law. Now, some people would say that that money ought to be given back because they they didn't get it legally. And there is an argument that we are pursuing in that general direction. But the principle is, and one that Peter Hammond has been revealing to a greater extent, a huge number of those spills that you will see on the sewage map that was mentioned earlier are illegal. And the opportunity to challenge that illegality is being fudged and smeared out of existence by DEFRA, government, and the Environment Bill, who are trying to hide that now by making out that they need to bring in new laws to stop sewage overflows, and that we ought to be looking at measuring rivers and a whole load of other ways to distract the public from the reality that the law is being broken on their doorstep, and the water industry is failing to deliver its obligation stated by Ofwat earlier in the year to deliver an effective sewerage system. So you are in a position of strength because you're on the moral high ground, you're on the legal high ground. And you may not have statutory powers, but you are a powerful organisation, and you have powerful links, and you have the ability to have a coalition of people who are demanding the right to have clean water and the right to not have their health impacted upon. So I think this is where you start to bring something really useful to the system, because if you start talking about applying the law and also resisting in certain circumstances and fighting additional loading from new housing to some of these failing sewage works, you may not have the statutory power to do it, but you will start to trouble people and you will start to trouble shareholders. So this is where the issues lie. You've got a huge amount of, we've got examples in Oxfordshire of sewage works spilling untreated sewage for 6 months without a stop. And a number of them, you'll see them with Fairford, will spill for months. Completely under capacity, promises from the water industry that they will be increased by Fairford by 40%. That will happen. That will happen 10 years after it was due. And it won't happen for another 4 years at the end of another cycle of development, by which time it will already be out of date. And that's the situation that we're in. So that's probably enough from me. We've got a project going on the Windrush at the moment that's agreed by Thames Water to do many of the things that you're going to talk about in detail, which is about local people identifying where their rainwater and flood water goes, and also the focus being on the water industry to stop dumping untreated sewage and to start improving their effluent to a 2021 standard, not the lowest common denominator.
Thanks, Ash. That's helpful, and it takes us back to what I think is the very purpose of what we're trying to do, and that is that thing about influence. We can't. We can influence. We can't change, but we can do our bit and start to shape locally. And I noted the word influence because that is certainly what we would be hoping to do. I've got a few indicated now. I'm going to go back to Paul. Then I've got Sarah indicated. Paul.
Yeah, no, well, actually, Ash took the bull by the horns there, because what I was going to suggest is that each group just gives us a short, just a short kind of their perspective, just to inform us. But Ash has already started the ball rolling on that. I think what I was going to ask Ash, I mean, obviously Ash and I have talked a lot about these things, but I think it would be useful for Ash to be able to share with the whole group, not now, but separately somehow, the kind of information that WASP have come up with, because I think it really helped me. It will help the rest of us, I think, inform us. But Ash, could you just help the rest of us by telling us why the spills do happen? In what circumstances do they happen and why? I think that would be helpful, please.
That would probably be good to hand that to Peter Hammond, because he's just doing the most recent work on that and he's got an excellent grasp of it. He's still there.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah.
Well, typically, when you get sort of additional rain over and above what you would normally have, the flow to a sewage treatment works will be, bigger than normal. And the agency, through their permits, allows sewage treatment works to take an excess over a certain amount, temporarily store it in a storm tank, and the storm tank at some point may get full, and then the permit says, yes, you can now spill in the river. But a lot of these permits really got the wrong sort of information in them. And in addition, the agency collect the wrong kind of information. So, for example, we collect very detailed data on how these sewage treatment works, cope with the flow or don't cope with the flow. And in fact, in some cases, we have 100 times more detail than the agency. The agency asks the water companies to submit information to them, but it's often just like vague totals, like a daily flow or the annual number of hours they spill. So through environmental information regulation requests, we can get 100 times more detail. We find out what's happening every 15 minutes at the sewage treatment works. So you can't hide these spills, you can't hide the illegality. We also find out when specifically a spill starts and stops, and that's how we're able to put together all this detail about, as Ash said, Fairford spilling for 6 months almost without a break. And then when you apply the permit conditions, you can find out when they're breaking the rules. And the agency, because they don't look at enough detail and they haven't got enough staff to do this regularly, they're missing a lot of illegal spilling of sewage. For example, we're about to publish a document that shows that the agency probably only have records of 5% of all the illegal spills that Thames Water makes. And that's probably true in other parts of the country. So I've looked at 30 of Thames works, but altogether I've looked at 150 works across the country, and it's happening everywhere. The other side to this is whether you can get access to information. So if you're going to be taking the water companies to task, you need to know which of them are worse in terms of complying, and also in terms of giving you the information you require. Severn Trent are the worst company I've come across. They suppress the data. They find excuses for not giving it. I actually get Philip Dunn, the MP for Ludlow, to intervene to force the company to give me data. They're supposed to give it to you within 20 days, and often they wait 20 days and then they send you an email saying we need another 20. And it goes on like that. Severn Trent are one of the worst. Now, another in your area, Wessex, I think it will deal with some of your issues. They're actually probably the best, and they're making big efforts to publish data on their website so you can actually see what's going on. You can actually detect the breaches of the permit yourself. And then Thames, who are somewhere in the middle. And because we're dealing with them directly, we're able to kind of twist their arm and get the data more regularly. But as I say, I think the picture that we're finding with Thames of many, many illegal spills will be echoed in Severn Trent, perhaps to a lesser extent with Wessex now.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. She's been waiting very patiently. Sarah James.
Hi, yes. So I think I put my hand up in response to a comment someone made a few minutes ago, but it was just to say, you know, we have got the Water Framework Directive, which has classified all our water systems, and I'm sure there's a lot of discussion to be made on the results behind it all, but it gives us a focus in and should be highlighting the areas that they think are a problem. And my other point was, coming out of that, there are all these catchment groups. The Canal and River Trust I sit on a couple of these. Again, you know, it takes time to get things going, but in some of the catchment groups, we're beginning to get positive improvements done. So I think it's something I can't remember everybody on the list, but that, you know, there are good groups to get involved with.
Thanks, Sarah. Okay, I'm making a few notes here as to that obviously what we're going to do as a group, and it's quite obvious, as I said earlier on, certainly we need the EA involved. It's all about those enforcements and the data. That's why I welcome what Peter and Ash have put in, because what I'm hoping the session, hopefully, we'll hone down to some questions when we have the water companies and the EA in front of us. And that point about influence in particular, because we can influence locally. We should be able to push. We can do what we can possibly push as members when it comes to Gloucestershire. I'm looking around to see if anybody else has raised any hands. Kate.
Yeah, before me, Rachel was putting up her hand, so perhaps.
Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, if we're focusing on wastewater treatment plants and spillages, we're quite a lot. Our groups are quite a lot of boots on the ground, as it were. Would it be useful if we try to encourage all of our members to video as many as possible of these storm overflows and combined sewer outlet flows? Would that be helpful? And then we could maybe send them to, I don't know, someone in this group.
Yeah, I've just seen one of those little magical thumbs up from one of our members. I'll go to her in a minute, but I'll come back to Kate first, and then I'll go to Susan, who just give it a massive thumbs up. Kate.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a very quick thing about planning, that it's actually, you know, it's a very complex process, and it's not necessarily about the sort of emotional thing. So it might be a personal view of yours, but there are certain guidelines that you have to adhere to, and those come from central government, and they are laws basically, and sometimes planning authorities do say no to certain planning, but it will then go to a government inspector who will overturn that decision. So I think I just wanted to make that as a brief point. It's not always, individuals sort of doing what's right, if you like, for want of a better word. There are certain guidelines that they have to adhere to.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. Susan, you were the one that flicked up the magical thumb, and then I'm going to go to Debbie. I'd like to hear from the surfers.
Yes, I totally agree with what Rachel was saying, and I was absolutely horrified when I actually saw that initial information that we were given with regard to the amount of pollutants that are going in. I find it so incredibly disappointing that the EA and the water companies aren't actually here this morning. And I sincerely hope that that isn't a reflection in their attitude towards what we are trying to actually, move forward on. This is a really serious problem. And although I only have a small streams really in my area, the actual whole patch of Gloucestershire, we really need to start taking some action on this. They need to be held responsible. And I think, as you say, we as our council members, we can really start to influence this and actually put pressure on them. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. I think all of us as elected members have all got issues in their individual divisions. And certainly we heard from Graham, and I know Paul's had the issues, and even Alex in relation to surface water runoff and storm events. I'm looking around. Debbie, please give us a view. What
Hi. Hi, I know there's no surf here in the Cotswolds, but so basically 20 years ago when I started with Surfers Against Sewage, I mean, that long ago we've been picking up microplastics and plastics pretty much every single day. And with what's happening with Cornwall at the moment, there's lots of amount of housing being built, which is cheap by cheap gel. And the systems aren't great at all. So you've got these old systems that haven't been sorted in the first place. So they attach the new systems with the old systems, and the old systems are leaking probably about 50% anyway. So they don't actually get to the core of sorting the old systems out before they start connecting the new systems. So there's been quite a few sewage spills down in Cornwall. But now I'm in the Cotswolds. So over sort of lockdown period, a lot of people, including myself, you can get quite stressed, anxious with being locked down and with what was going on. So a lot of people turned to the rivers, the water, where we'd feel safe and where we'd go while swimming. People started to really increase their confidence, enjoy being by the water, etc., etc. Even my children, there's a wild swimming app which basically tells you you can put in your location, it can find your location, tell you exactly where to swim. As they say, secret spots, but they're probably not secret spots anymore. So over the lockdown period, I know a lot of people use this app. So you'd go park up your car, you go for a lovely walk, and you hit apparently a beautiful river. You go to the river, and actually with all the beautiful pictures that you see on this wild swimmers app, is not exactly what you see in real life. Now, to me, I don't know whether we should sort of go whoever controls the wild swimming app, because it is a disgrace. It really is. So you've got these beautiful pictures of children splashing about in these rivers, and of course they're not. I mean, in particular myself, I swam in the Thames, and I've swum parts of the Windrush, and the next day I wasn't feeling too good. So for a good 2 or 3 days, I was quite sick. So for me, it's that sort of generation thing, the next generation, which I'm really, really extremely worried about. And for me, I'm so lucky to have basically met Ashley Smith and now working with him alongside the Cotswold River Trust, because at the moment I'm sort of new to what's going on with the water companies, and each time I'm learning, it's really upsetting. And like Dom said as well, it's like we keep going round and round in circles. The environmental agency is not here, you know, and we do seriously need to start taking action, because the health and the risk of people and young children, I mean, it's a disgrace, really. So that's sort of my, you know, because so many people I know that thrive on wild swimming to make themselves better in themselves. And basically the water companies and also agricultural companies are screwing this up for us, and it's not fair.
Thanks, Debbie.
Welcome.
I've got Graham, and then I'll come back to Rachel, who's raised her hand again. Graham.
Thank you, Chair. As much as what has been said, really, I mean, I think that people that got to be out of the fire with all this is certainly the Environment Agency, because when you talk in planning, as you know, you're a member like myself. If once they give that license or that go ahead, if you do anything different in planning law, you end up taking costs on the council you're standing in, whether it be district or whether it be county. And so, you know, it's the EA that need to be controlling these things, and they obviously should be controlling more of these water companies, because they're seem to be more interested in profit than. I mean, don't get me wrong. I know they've got an antiquated system built in maybe in Victorian times in many cases, but they should be invested in the pinch points and where these spillages are occurring, and they're occurring quite severely now. You know, you can see raw sewage where the train of tracked down through villages, and even on the playing fields and football fields, which is not good. And my father used to swim in the lake as a minor in the Forest of Dean years ago, but I wouldn't want my grandchildren to do it today. Thank you.
Thanks, Graham. I've taken the screen down, maybe to help me picking up your signal. I had Rachel, and then I'm going back to Sarah James, who's indicated again. Rachel?
It was just a quick response back to Debbie about the Ilkley, the safe bathing water status that Ilkley fought for years and years to get, and we were all really encouraged by that. But I only read a couple of days ago that it's now failed again, because nobody's testing it and monitoring it, and nobody's changed any practice. So that was a bit depressing. But I do sometimes think if we want to get changes made, you can do the best. You can make a huge cry out for the ecology and the environment and the wildlife, but you'll probably get more response if we go for damage to human beings. So whether we should be pushing more for safe bathing status in a lot of our rivers and streams and tributaries, that's just a thought.
Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, I've had a fair few more indicate now. I'm going to Sarah. Then I've got Kate, Paul, and Ash again. So, Sarah.
Oh, yeah. So mine was just a comment about the Environment Agency. We work with them a lot. And, you know, all the people I work with are very committed individuals and are trying their best. And they are being stymied by legislation, you know, their own internal monies and things like that. So I just wanted to sort of give, you know, the ones I've come across are trying their best. They're well aware of the issues, and I just wanted to flag that up, really.
Thanks, Sarah. Noted. Kate.
Of things. I just wondered if Sophie could ask in future that if we ask organisations to attend, if the person who's supposed to be coming can't, can they send a substitute? And that we feel quite strongly about this. We do want people here representing, and I think that's a good point that Sarah's made, actually. The EA aren't here, and quite often, and we know this as councillors, don't we, that we're sort of branded as this, but actually individuals are doing their best and are quite passionate about what we do or what they do. It is about legislation, but it is mainly about funding. It's the same old thing. There just isn't the funding there for people to go out and look at things and make prosecutions or whatever needs doing. And I think we should send a cross-party motion and ask for funding or whatever else we need to do. Let's get some wording from Ash. You know, we're here to do what we can, and you've already hinted at a couple of things, but write a motion for us that we can take to council and get everybody to agree to. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. I'm going to Paul, and I know Ash has got his hand up, and I just see Dom wants to come back in as well. So Paul, then Ash, then Dom.
Yeah, thank you. It's a question for Debbie. So, and a wider point just before I ask that question, really about, you know, having our goals. You know, it's not just about finding out the extent of pollution, but having goals of getting designated bathing status for at least some waterways. What I was going to ask on that point, I was going to ask Debbie, where are people actually swimming in Gloucestershire, as far as you're aware? Where are they swimming? Which rivers or which waterways? Because actually, if they are swimming there, and it is safe in inverted commas, or at least as safe as it could be, that might be the starting point for places that could get a designated bathing status.
Yeah, of course. There was a part in Lechlade near the Thames, which a lot of people tend to paddleboard around in and around there. Also, different parts of the Windrush. I can't remember exactly what bit of the Windrush. You just type in your location, and it will tell you where to go. But generally, people are swimming the Thames and the Windrush. I mean, those are the places that I was swimming in throughout lockdown. So, I mean, there's many more, which you obviously just type in your location, or they'll find you and they'll tell you where to go.
Just coming back on that point, if I may, and I won't take long.
No, sure.
Obviously, you've mentioned a couple of rivers there that we know are also very polluted in parts.
Yeah.
So it's really key, isn't it, for people to have a very, very sort of targeted location. Otherwise, they could end up becoming extremely ill, sort of thing. So this is what we're working against, isn't it? I guess.
Well, this is it, and I think maybe I could find out who created the World Swimming app to maybe discuss with them exactly that, because there are a lot of images of children having fun in those streams, which is I have 2 children, so for me it's really worrying that people can say, okay, well, today let's find where we can go swimming, and they go swimming and they think that, you know, personally, a lot of people that don't understand rivers, the sea rivers, they think that seeing a river that's maybe green or brown, that's probably the natural color, which in some case it can be. So they get misleaded into, oh, that's probably just a bit of mud or that kind of thing. You know what I mean? So and they just jump in. They might swallow the water, but they think that's fine. But obviously they don't. So again, in my case, I'm going to be looking at doing a lot of educational talks in schools in and around the Cotswold area to kind of explain, so they can kind of see what they're looking for.
Okay, thanks, Deb.
No worries.
She hasn't indicated, but I'm going to ask her a question, because there was some film I saw, whether it was on social media or not. Rachel, is there any swimming that you're aware of in the Wye? But I mean, I must admit, I've been in there myself historically.
Do you know Angela Jones, The Wild Woman of the Wye? This is a really excellent book. I'm advertising. It's a really excellent book she's just done. But she's the one that's been towing this coffin, saying death of the Wye. We've presented it to Senedd. We've done it twice at Monmouth, Ross. She's continuing to raise the campaign for the pollution in the Wye. And she is devastated. She's having to stop swimming certain areas because the pollution is so bad. If you want to
that via email, and I'll share it with the group.
Yeah, I mean, I share some of the things that other members share, particularly around development control, but we don't want to get into a major planning thing, because of course, the AR statutory consultees on major planning applications, never hear much from them, and we know why, because they never want to defend any line they take at a particular appeal, do they? Okay, I'm looking at members now. I've not heard. Alex is still with us. I've not heard from Alex, but I know Alex shares the same concerns as me, particularly around development control and surface water flooding. Anyone got anything? Yeah,
sorry, Chair. I was just going to jump in. As I was mentioned, I thought that'd be a good way of segue my way into the conversation. It was just more to kind of press the point that Paul made, really. It was about I'd say ask that question, if they're control of the water company, what would you do? I guess would kind of be my question. Just to kind of press that point forward a bit more. Because it's all very well us coming out with these things, but I'd quite like to hear those action points move forward and have some sort of development plan in that place.
Yep. Thanks, Alex. Okay. Ash. I've just seen something in chat again. Oh, this was in relation to test kits, etc. Yeah, that they've answered that off screen between Ash and Susan. Thank you. Okay, so we're getting to probably a sort of a wind up of this particular session. Have you got enough there, Sophie? And do members feel they've got enough out of this morning to really hone in on basically making a difference and trying to get the best that we can on this in relation to the water quality in Gloucestershire? Are members content at that? I'm looking at members in particular because we're going to be the ones that are pushing. Paul's giving me a thumb up. Do you want a word, Paul, or?
No, happy.
Okay. Dom, I mean, you chair environment scrutiny. Are you quite happy with the focus and the way we're taking it forward? Is there anything else you would push other than what we've already discussed?
No, I think I'm broadly happy, Phil, but I think it's really useful that you've focused on the months ahead in terms of what deliverables are we going to be able to push through, and I think we're on the right course for that, but I think, like everyone, it is difficult trying to figure out what we actually can do ourselves, and the levers we own are limited, aren't they? But a really good session today, understanding the broad sense from community organisations and the activity and the shared frustration, I think. So I'm happy with this. It's not scheduled to come back to I haven't got it in the Environment Scrutiny Committee on a concrete date unless Sophie tells me I've missed it. So Phil, do flag with us when you think time on target wise you're going to bring it back to us, and I'll obviously make the space. But Sophie's wagging her head, so I don't think I've missed anything on that.
Yeah, I mean, we want to push on and we want some outcomes. It's, as I said to Paul the other week, it's taken us long enough to get it here anyway.
Yeah.
What I don't want it doing is withering on the vine or floating away. Yeah, thanks, Ashish. Public awareness is a key. We might want to put. I did want to ask the question about whether or not we do put anything out from this session. Kate's indicated.
Thanks.
Yes, Kate.
Yeah, one of the things we talked about was if there's anybody else we should invite another time. I think I'd quite like to invite the Wild Woman of the Wye. I think that's Angela Jones.
Yeah.
If for no other reason, because she's doing practical things, and I think a lot of us want to know what else we can do, or groups or people that are contacting us, how can they help? And if she's doing that sort of thing, then I think she would be an important ally to invite.
Thanks, Kate. Alex has got a raised hand. Alex.
Just a question for Ash and Rachel, really. If you had a silver bullet to fix everything, what would it be?
It would be charging the water industry per litre for the untreated sewage that they dump. So you actually bring in market forces to make that a punitive amount, whereby they will make more money if they start treating rivers with respect, instead of this ridiculous charade of regulation that continues at the moment.
Yeah, nice one, Ash. Nice
Thank you.
one.
Rachel, what would your response be?
Yeah, absolutely. Make the polluter pay, but make them pay with teeth. Because like when they fined Southern Water the other day, the record 90 million, apparently they were out the following day discharging again because the fine didn't actually have enough teeth to it. I think it would be another magic bullet for me would be the system is there. That's what's frustrating. If it was properly funded, properly monitored, properly evaluated, properly then the polluters were charged, then we've probably got quite a good system. But I'm kind of fluffing, really. I don't know. I think that's one of the problems. I don't really know how you can turn it around quickly. And I have to say, I'm quite concerned. I think our rivers are struggling, really struggling. There's, if we could, there are a couple of American companies who are working on, for us it's mainly algal blooms and eutrophication, which is the main problems, and they are working on a certain system that can, without destroying the wildlife and the whole nature balance, to try and actually tamper down, draw out some of the algal blooms. And we're going, not myself, but another member of Friends of the Lower Wye is going to talk to the Welsh Senedd about it, the Environment Minister there next week. So I don't know. I don't know enough about it to be able to report back on that. But I think nature-based solutions are really important. And I think if we can, particularly for flooding, and I think that way will also, there's so many local people who want to do something but feel helpless. But if we can get people helping to pull out invasive species, helping to plant trees, helping to put meanders back in, working with wildlife trusts, working with our local councils, I think that would really kickstart it into working, because basically politicians rely on voters to vote them in. So if you get enough local people, the politicians will have to follow us in the end. That's what I'd say.
Yeah, thanks, Rach. Well, of course, you're at the Y, and you'd be aware we have had one meeting of this Forest of Dean Forum, which is very much about natural flood solutions. It's a completely different topic, but there is a synergy there. Paul, you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, it just another suggestion is I think it's the Ilkley Clean River campaign in Yorkshire who've had a lot of good traction on this. I'm not entirely sure where they ended up. I think they got clean water bathing status. I'm not sure, but certainly they've made some positive moves on this. Can we either get them in or understand what they've done to get to where they are, please?
Yeah, I think so. Sophie had picked that up in our, if you like, our pre-meetings. I think she'd gone looking for information around that. Had you not, Soph?
Yeah, so we located a contact in Bradford County Council. So I'm just speaking to an officer there who was involved in the process, and they've sent a lot of information over that they're really happy to share with the group. So I spoke to the chair about setting up an individual meeting with them just to focus on that specifically, so you could understand what they had to go through to get to the status that they've got now.
That's always helpful, and it goes along with what Tom was saying about, are there things out there that are positives, and possibly we might want to follow that up with them either in our proposed session or maybe pick something up, because I'm in the hands of members. It doesn't have to be just that one single session, does it? If we really want to bottom things out, then that sort of evidence, I think, is going to be very, very helpful. We put our challenge out there. Over to members, really. Have they got something they could circulate to us that we could have before the 14th meeting then? So
I'll go back through the emails because they were very detailed. They did send a lot over, and I will follow up on organising a meeting with them. So I'll take that as an action and I'll get back to you.
Could I suggest you contact Professor Rick Batterby? I'll send you his email address. He is an academic, but he's done all the scientific studies, and he's just recently sent me a report, a follow-up on the state of the river and what's been happening, since they've got the status. And he would be a great person, probably also to point you into the direction of some. I think I saw a presentation they did summarizing how they went through the process, and they've probably got that on their website. And he'll probably point you to where it is, and that will help you get a summary of how they did it.
Thanks, Peter. That's helpful. Okay with that, Paul? Okay. Well, before I wind up, we're just approaching midday. Is there anything else that anybody would like to feed in now? We're scheduled, I think this is 14th of October, isn't it, for that day? We've agreed we're certainly going to. It's face to face, so we are going to split the EA from the water companies that attend. That's a prerequisite. So we'll look at the timings. I know we set that up. That would be very much Sophie's domain again. We're all dependent on Sophie. But if you can work up some sort of timetable for that, even if it meant we don't want to be even particularly in the same waiting room, do we? So Dom, yeah.
Bill, slap my wrist if I'm making a suggestion that's unacceptable. In my mind, if you want a rich and full discussion with the EA, I wonder whether it should be a closed session, not open to the public. If that's not acceptable for the 14th of October, I would strongly recommend we do schedule one of those in, because I think there's the need for a really open and honest conversation, and it may be being fair to them that doing that whilst publicised to the world is perhaps not fair or not the best way to get what we all want to get out of that conversation.
Yes, yeah, I understand what you're saying. Okay. With that, anyone got anything else to add?
Just actually to second Councillor Morris's point there, Chair, of it's really, really important that we have a closed door session with these groups, because we want to find solutions rather than press releases, and I think that's really important for us to do that. If they also want to have a public facing one as well, so then they have a feeling that they can get their views across to the public in that regard, I personally don't have a problem with that, as long as we have that private session so that we can actually get to the meat of the matter.
Thanks, Alex. That's helpful. Okay. Anyone else? No? Well, can I firstly, again, apologise for the delay in getting online. Having said that, I think it's been a very full, open and honest session, and thank all participants that have added so much more that we couldn't possibly have found as members anyway. And I'm very grateful to you, grateful that you waited, and grateful that you brought such quality of input to us. Thank you very much indeed. And obviously, you will be able to watch the session on the 14th. And if you feel there's something that perhaps you didn't say today that you would have liked to get across, by all means, email it to Sophie, particularly well, not just the technical stuff from WASP, but those users like Debbie and Rachel. Thank you for your time, and let's hope we can take a few things forward that may just bring some fruition and influence. Perhaps that's the best way of putting it. Thank you.